Would the state call its next witness, please?
Thomas Coyne.
All right, sir, if you will please raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give will be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. If you'll have a seat and then adjust the microphone so you can speak into it, and then I will ask you to please state your name and then spell your name.
Sure. Thomas Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E. Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Coyne, what is your occupation?
Sure. I'm the current Chief Medical Examiner for the District 2 Medical Examiner's Office based in Tallahassee.
Dr. Coyne, can you tell the jury what is your educational background?
Sure. Undergraduate degree from Rutgers University, followed by an MD from Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, which is also Rutgers University. And at the same time, I completed a PhD in toxicology and pharmacology from Rutgers University. After that, I completed a residency training in pathology or general pathology known as anatomic pathology at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. At that same time, I completed subspecialty training in neuropathology. And then I went to Miami, the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office, where I completed a year in forensic pathology training. So currently, right now, I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, neuropathology, and forensic pathology.
And can you also tell the jury your work experience?
Sure. So after Miami, I worked for approximately 8 years in Fort Myers, Florida, at the District 21 Medical Examiner's Office. I started out as the Associate Medical Examiner and moved up to the Deputy Chief. After that, I came to Gainesville, where I worked as the Chief Medical Examiner for District 8 for approximately 18 months, and then took over as the Chief Medical Examiner in Tallahassee now, almost 3 months now.
Doctor, what is pathology?
Sure. Pathology is an area of medicine, much like general medicine. We sort of work behind the scenes. A pathologist's job really is to study disease and identify disease in all its forms. And we work in hospital systems and with general practitioners, generally receiving tissues, fluids, or examining the person when they're deceased through autopsy. The goal of which is to identify disease, assist the physician in identifying and following treatment for that disease, or in deceased persons like I work with, trying to identify cause and manner of death.
And doctor, what is the difference between pathology and forensic pathology?
Sure. Pathology, again, is just the general study of disease, and we use a whole host of tools, from molecular genetics, histology, autopsy practice to identify disease. Forensics goes a little further, such that we understand or learn about the mechanisms of how injury occurs. Not just injury or injury in all forms, but also patterns of decomposition, how decomposition occurs, environmental injury, get a little toxicology and poisonings in there as well. And we use that, again, to really come together and figure out why a person dies and then the manner of why a person dies.
So you're board certified in forensic pathology?
Yes, I am.
And what does board certification mean?
The American Board of Pathology has a process by which we undergo certification. So generally it's an exam that we take after training, and then that's followed up yearly with just maintenance of certification.
Can you tell the jury your duties as the medical examiner?
Sure. As the medical examiner, whether it was in District 8 or District 2, I oversee all of the cases that fall under our jurisdiction for that area. And so my goal is to work with law enforcement or other local hospital physicians to, again, figure out why a person died and arrive at a cause and manner of death. I also oversee the operations of the office, work with our medical death investigators, and again, interact with multiple law enforcement agencies throughout the area.
Doctor, does part of your job include doing autopsies to determine the cause and manner of death?
Yes, it does.
Approximately how many autopsies have you performed or assisted with, would you say?
Approaching around 3,500 now.
Can you explain to the jury what exactly is an autopsy?
Yeah, sure. An autopsy is like examining a live patient in an office. It begins first by looking at the external features of a body. So we look just for normal body features, height, weight, hair color, and then we look to see, is this person congenitally normal? Are there any other disease processes or injuries that may explain why this person is deceased? After we document all of our external findings, we move internal. So we will look at all of the internal body cavities. So the abdominal cavity, the chest cavity, the cranial vault, to look at the brain. And again, we will look at all those organs, seeing are they structurally normal? Are there any disease processes or injuries that I may observe? And then putting it all together to arrive at, again, the cause and manner of death.
Doctor, I want to bring you to this case specifically.
Sure.
Did you perform an autopsy on Ariya Paige?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember when and where?
It was at the District 8 Medical Examiner's Office in Gainesville. I believe it was July 21st, 2023.
And did you determine how old Ariya Paige was?
Yes, it was. So her age was made available to us through investigation, and she was 10 months old.
And when you did the autopsy on her, just generally, what was the first thing you did, the procedures you would normally go through?
Sure. It began with the external examination and making the determination that this was a congenitally normal 10-month-old female without any observable congenital abnormalities or developmental abnormalities.
So you didn't observe any external abnormalities?
Other than the fact that she had early features of decomposition and there was some desiccation or drying of the oral cavity that was visible on inspection.
And then did you move to the internal examination?
Yes.
Let me start with the external examination. Can you tell the jury specifically what you did with the external examination regarding Ariya Paige?
Sure. So it begins by essentially taking photo documenting the body as it's received. So we'll open the body bag. If there are any clothing or medical devices that are present, we will remove them, document them, and then again begin looking literally from head to toe, examining the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the external body features. And again, as I mentioned, the only thing I can report here, normal developmental 10-month-old female. She had drying of the oral cavity, and we were able to see green discoloration of the abdomen, which is a characteristic of early decomposition.
Would you say that upon the external examination that Ariya Paige presented as a normally developed, well-nourished child?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what is rigor mortis and what is liver mortis?
Sure. Rigor mortis is just basically after death, the muscles of the body will move into a contracted state. And that's because as we die and blood flow stops, the movement of energy into our muscles ceases. And so therefore, the muscles become contracted. And then that firm contracted state is what we call rigor mortis. Over time, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, that will break due to the process of decomposition. And so then we will say rigor mortis is passed. Livor mortis refers to the settling of blood within our body after death. And so the heart is no longer pumping, blood will settle based on gravity, and so it will settle into the skin, and you will begin to see discoloration in the skin. Generally, if you were laying on your back, let's say, you would see that discoloration in the back of the head, the back of the legs. That is called livor mortis. That also will become fixed over about 6 to 12 hour period as decomposition sets in. So initially, the livor mortis can move. So if a body is found on its back and then it's moved within, let's say, an hour period, flipped overwards, the livor can move based upon gravity. But over the course of, like I said, 6 to 12 hours, it will become fixed.
And did you see signs of livor mortis?
Yes. No.
And specifically, what was that again, doctor? I'm sorry.
So sure, yeah. So the livor mortis on the decedent here was mostly posterior. Fixed as well. So it looked as if, she had, for instance, I think the report came to us that she was within a car seat at the time of, her death, and her livor mortis pattern was consistent with that.
Did you notice anything unusual about the child's lips?
Again, just the desiccation and also the degree of decomposition, which is a little more advanced than I would have expected for her time of death.
Did you determine a reason for that?
Sure. Again, we're dependent upon the information that's presented us at the time, and so of course I knew that this child had been left within a car seat, in a car, in a vehicle, exposed to sun for an approximate 5-hour period, and so that would be consistent with those findings.
Did you then move, doctor, to doing an internal examination?
I did.
Can you tell the jury what you did with the internal examination and your findings with that?
Sure. So again, as I said before, we examined all of the internal body cavities, all of the organs, and essentially she was a normal developing child, no gross evidence of any congenital abnormalities or any other reason that I would have seen to have led to her death based upon organ pathology. The only thing I can say that was a little bit out of the ordinary was the fact that her lungs were a little bit full of fluid, or edematous, as we say, and as well.
As part of the autopsy, were toxicology tests done on Ariya Paige?
Yes.
And what were the results of the toxicology testing?
They were negative for drugs of abuse.
Okay. So there was nothing.
That's correct.
So would it be fair to say from your external examination and your internal examination, Ariya Paige seemed to be a well-nourished child with no abnormalities at all?
That's correct.
Okay. Based on your experience and training, do you have an opinion as to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of death of Ariya Paige?
Yes, complications of hyperthermia.
And what is hyperthermia?
Hyperthermia refers to all of the pathophysiological processes that occur when our body temperature becomes elevated or severely elevated in this case.
Is that the same as heat stroke?
It's hyperthermia is the overarching term. Heat stroke is a clinical presentation that occurs during that process, and that's sort of the end stage, if you will. If heat stroke isn't attended to, then the person could die or have severe consequences thereof. And so heat stroke, heat exhaustion, those are all clinical presentations of hyperthermia.
But in this case, you determined the cause of death to be hyperthermia.
That's correct.
In your career as a medical examiner, have you dealt with patients who have succumbed to hyperthermia?
Yes, both adult and pediatric.
And pediatric. Roughly how many pediatric cases have you dealt with?
Over the course of 10 years in Florida, I've had approximately 4 cases I was involved with of children who died due to their being left within a car on a hot day. I've also had cases of exhaustion, external or environmental hyperthermia in both kids and adults as well.
Can you explain to the jury what type of training and education you have in relation to dealing with hyperthermia and what that is?
Sure. Well, it starts with your medical training. And so, of course, to triage a patient who is hyperthermic, you have to understand all of the underlying processes or pathophysiological processes, if you will, that occur when a person's body is overheated. That goes from febrile illnesses or having a fever to hyperthermia, meaning it's not driven by the hypothalamus. And so yes, so you start in medical school with that, how to recognize it, what you do to treat those patients, and then from a pathology standpoint, you learn about how to identify those changes in tissues or in a deceased person. So from the beginning of my career on to the end of my training, I've had education, if you will, about hyperthermia.
And doctor, can you describe to the jury if an individual has passed away from hyperthermia, what happens to the
Sure. Well,
in that instance?
I talked a little bit before about accelerated decomposition, or the fact that in this case I was able to see green discoloration of the abdomen. So when a person dies and they have elevated body temperature, it accelerates the processes of decomposition, especially with hypothermia, because part of that process, as a person is trying to compensate for the elevated body temperature, the circulation is sort of rerouted, if you will. Blood vessels dilate in the periphery to allow you to get rid of excess heat. Sweating occurs, and that usually comes at the compromise of circulation to our gut. And so even in persons who are living, they tend to have some underlying gut pathology. And that can also allow the bacteria within our gut to get out of our gut and get into our body tissues. And a person who's live could also present to a hospital with sepsis because of that. But for me, looking at a deceased person, when that process begins while the person is live and it continues after death. So therefore, the movement of bacteria out of the gut into your tissues allows for the acceleration of decomposition. That is further accelerated because of the higher body temperatures. And so the bacteria thrive in those environments. And so in this particular case, I was able to see changes to her body that I would have normally not seen had she been maintained at a normal body temperature.
What happens to the body temperature in a situation like this?
In hypothermia, well, especially in a child, it rapidly changes. And so normally, we exist around 98.6, let's say. Kids have a much larger body surface area relative to their mass. And so they have a lot more surface area that can rapidly heat up, especially if they're placed into a very warm environment. A car like that, even on a mild day, anywhere from like 70 degrees to, let's say, 95 plus, can get very warm on the inside in a rapid amount of time, even if the car had prior air conditioning running prior to being turned off. So within a 20 to 30 minute time frame, temperatures can exceed 115 degrees up to even, studies have shown up to 140 degrees. And so a child in that environment will rapidly begin to have an elevation of heart rate. They will have an elevation of breathing. Their body is trying to get rid of excess heat. And in doing so, it puts an inordinate strain on the heart. It leads to incredible rapid losses of fluid, so they will begin to dehydrate very rapidly. And it leads to derangements in electrolytes. And because blood flow is being rerouted to just support the heart, the brain, the vital organs, other organs like your gut, your kidneys begin to shut down, and you begin to have organ failure. And if that progresses, the heart itself usually stops, or you have a dysrhythmia.
What other type of organ damage would an infant experience who is experiencing hyperthermia?
It will affect almost every organ in the body, from the skin to the gut, but most importantly, the vital organs, the heart and the brain, are compromised. The brain especially, because we have loss of oxygen due to, as the pressures drop, because your body is massively dilating blood vessels to get rid of excessive heat, that leads to decreased perfusion of vital structures in the brain. And a child's brain is different than our brain. It requires more per minute volume of blood flow because their brain is developing. And so there are certain brain regions can become hypoxic, and that could lead to irreversible brain damage, even if you treat this child and you resuscitate them from this presentation. But again, the most vital organs that sustain damage will be the heart and the brain.
Would the brain swell?
Yes.
Body temperature would obviously raise. What would be the temperature that it could go up to?
Sure. The body will move up to whatever temperature is within the car. I mean, so generally death will occur prior to a person going above 10 degrees. Your organs will shut down. But even after a person is deceased, your body temperature will match that of its environment if it's there long enough.
So if the vehicle were 120, the body temperature would go to 120. If it was 130, it would go to 130.
That's correct.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Doctor, I think that's all that I have. I tender the witness, Your Honor.
Very well. Cross-examination?
Good morning, Doctor.
How are you?
You and I have spoken before.
Yes, we have.
correct? Okay. I want to ask you a couple of questions about your career up to this point.
Sure.
I think you told us that you went to Rutgers University and then to, I guess, a medical school that was there, correct?
Yes, Robert Wood Johnson.
I missed the date that you graduated. I'm sorry.
I graduated 2009. 2006, my PhD. 2009, my MD.
And did you become certified as a physician at Rutgers or in Florida?
So 2009, I completed my, actually it would have been 2009, I completed the first two steps of the US MLE, which is the United States Medical Licensing Exam. 2010, during my first year of residency, I completed the third and final step of the United States Medical Licensing Exam. After completion of my residency in 2014, I then became certified in anatomic pathology and neuropathology. And then following year, I completed my forensic pathology training, and so I became board certified in forensic pathology, and that should have been 2015.
When did you come to Florida?
Came to Florida 2013.
I think you told us you were the assistant ME in Fort Myers, I believe you said?
Yep, started out, I was hired as an associate medical examiner, and then within, I think, 2 years, I became the deputy chief, and I was that up till 2022 when I left. Yep.
So you've been doing autopsies or in this field of pathology since about 2013.
Autopsy since 2009 when I started residency. Yep.
Doctor, you mentioned something about being board certified, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have what's called a CV. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Do you have one?
I do, yes.
Okay. In that CV, do you list this educational background that you have?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you also list any articles you may have written on
Yes.
the subject? How many do you think you've written?
Abstracts I've published probably 25, and articles is probably close to, I'd say 15 to 20, I presume.
How many?
Probably 15 to 20, I presume.
15 to 20?
In that
Okay.
range, yes.
These are articles that are published in some type of medical journal?
Yes.
Do you recall what journals those were?
They vary. They're pathology journals, neuroscience journals. I even have a journal of veterinary medicine as well.
In veterinary medicine, you said?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is that standard for individuals in your field to do that?
Yes, more so, I'd say, for those of us who have that PhD background, because we sort of come out of a research area. But yes, it's very common for doctors to publish.
Are your articles ever cited by other doctors?
Yeah, I believe they are, yeah.
Is that a common practice as
Yes.
well in your
Yeah,
field?
yes, it is, yeah.
Right. So things like writing articles and having your articles referenced or cited are things that are common in the field of
Yes.
your field and generally in science in general, correct?
Yeah, that's how we progress medicine, yep.
How you progress medicine. In other fields as well in science, correct?
That's correct.
Doctor, in this particular case, I don't know if you gave us the date. What date was the autopsy done?
July 21st,
And the child died on July 19th?
July 19th, yeah.
Right. Would you agree with me that when you examined Ariya Paige, she had no signs of any injuries?
Correct.
No, what I would call trauma. Is that correct?
Correct.
And define that for the jury. What's trauma mean?
Yeah, sure. Trauma, we tend to break it down into blunt trauma versus sharp trauma. And blunt trauma encompasses all injuries like abrasions or, say, bruises or contusions where a force was applied to the body or body tissues. That also includes fractures. It includes hemorrhage within body temperatures, like tissues, whether it be a bruise in the arm or even a hemorrhage within an organ. Sharp injuries include, cutting, cuts from sharp injuries. Lacerations tend to fall under the one category as tearing of tissues. Those are all the types of injuries we would describe.
And I think the state asked you how many times you may have examined children, done autopsies on children, correct?
Yes. Of my probably well over 500. I mean, I started out training at the Penn and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so I had a lot of exposure of infant autopsies in the early part of my career, and that's continued. I'd say probably what we see as medical examiners, maybe 10% of our cases are pediatric cases.
10%?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I wrote down that you said that you believe you've done 4 autopsies of children that were left in a hot car.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you say that, you mean in the district that you were in at the time, correct?
Yes, so that's from my time in Miami through Fort Myers and, of course, Gainesville.
And how many medical districts are there in the state of Florida?
There are 25.
So you've worked in 3 of them,
Yes.
and you've seen 4 hot cars.
Well, I've worked in more than just 3. You know,
Okay.
we kind of move around a little bit, but yes.
Okay. Are you aware that there's more than that in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Is it a common thing, would you say?
For children left in hot, not common, but I know it does occur every year. Yeah.
I want to ask you about something you said toward the end of your testimony. I wrote this down, and if I have it wrong, you correct me, okay? You said, even on a mild day, and I think you gave temperatures between maybe 75 and 90 something. I don't recall exactly what you said.
Yeah, so there has been a number of studies that have been performed. I think of the largest one out in San Francisco, looking at the differences in internal car temperatures on cars left within or in exposure to full sun, and temperatures ranging from like 72 degrees up through I think 96. And it didn't really have a difference with regards to how rapid temperature can increase within a car. And even in mild temperatures, you could still achieve very high internal temperatures.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm clear, you said there were studies that have been done.
That's correct.
That even on days when the outside temperature is somewhere between 72 and 96,
Yeah, that's correct.
you can have a child or someone die in a car, correct?
Correct.
Right. And you also said that based on these studies, a car can become very hot in 20 to 30 minutes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you generally about the studies that you referred to. You, like every other doctor, relies on other people's work to form your own opinions, correct?
Correct.
You never did your self-research on these hot car deaths in the sense that you did research on your own.
No, I have not.
So, like every other expert, you rely upon things that you read from other people, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's true about a lot of what you do.
Yes, very true.
I think you said in that same part about the 20 to 30 minutes, you said the temperature can reach 115 degrees. Is that what the studies show?
Right. Well, yeah, it can certainly get above that high. I know some studies have shown temperatures even reaching close to 150 degrees. I don't know the correlation between that and the external temperature, but certainly whether it be mild or temperatures above 90, they can certainly get into the 115 range in a short period of time.
In 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, correct.
And I think you told us earlier that death for anyone would occur at about 110 degrees, correct?
Correct.
And that's at the max, right?
Yeah, that's, again, the even temperatures, mild external temperatures in a normal heat of summer, it puts a stress on your body to have increased temperature regulation. So higher than normal temperatures are a stress to our body.
I just want to be sure I'm clear. So you're saying at 110 degrees at a max, a person would die?
If they're kept in there for a long period of time, yes.
Okay. And they could die at a lower temperature as well, correct?
Sure.
And you've indicated, I think, toward the end of your testimony on direct that even if you took a child's temperature who had been in a car for several hours and that temperature was higher than 110, that individual would have died long before whatever temperature they measured, correct?
That's correct.
If there was a temperature in the car of 130 or whatever the number may be, anybody in there would have died at 110 degrees.
That's correct. Yeah.
And if you testified already, even a mild day, that would happen in 20 to 30 minutes, correct?
That's correct.
Can I have just a moment, Judge? I think Mr. SD asked you about heat stroke. Did you use that phrase?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's correct to say that heat stroke would occur at 104 degrees and above, right?
That tends to be where it's defined, yes.
I'm sorry?
That's where it's defined. They say that, you'll have symptoms, or if you present to a hospital, let's say, they define heat exhaustion and heat stroke. There's minor differences or overlapping symptoms, but the temperature range for heat stroke is 104 and above.
Again, you yourself have never done this research. You've relied upon other people who've done
That's correct.
this, correct? Is it fair to say that in this particular case, you relied a lot on what you were told had occurred?
Sure. We had to. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, you had no choice, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
The child had no trauma of any kind, no bruising, no broken bones, no obvious signs of injury, correct?
Or congenital abnormalities, yes.
Congenital abnormalities. So just looking at the autopsy findings, had you not known what had occurred, would you be able to diagnose this?
No, like many types of causes of death in forensic pathology, you're relying upon scene investigation, what your investigators find, what EMS find, because there are a whole host of causes of death that really have no specific physical findings, and this is one example of that.
And you described for the state sort of the process of what goes on when you start to have heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and you go through that process until you die. You described that to the state.
Yeah. I mean, I could. Yeah, I have.
You have today to describe that, correct? You would agree with me that you could go through that process while you were asleep, correct?
Sure. The process of accelerated heart rate, increased sweating, dehydration can occur while you are asleep.
Just a moment. Thank you, Dr. Coyne. I have another question, John.
Any redirect of the doctor?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Coyne, as a medical examiner, when you examine a body, would it be fair to say that a body isn't just presented to you, but you have to talk to the investigators from the sheriff's office, from the medical examiner's office to find out what happened?
Yes, there's a large process that goes into it. So we communicate with both the EMS personnel and law enforcement who arrive on scene. We may discuss findings with hospital physicians who have seen a patient prior. We concur with, or we review medical records, laboratory testing that's done before a body comes to us. And we also employ medical legal death investigators who tend to go to the scene and who will work directly with law enforcement or EMS to gather information that's important for me during the autopsy.
And when you say important to you for the autopsy, is that to help you in determining the cause of death?
Yeah, the cause of death, the cause and manner of death, for that matter, are not just determined based upon the autopsy findings. And I'd say probably more than half of the cases, they're reliant upon what we obtain from scene investigation as well as that of the law enforcement.
Defense counsel had mentioned to you about what a child would go through. Could it happen when a child is asleep? And you had said yes, is my understanding.
Yeah, because Sure. A child could be sleeping during this process, but also understand that the physiological derangements that can occur within a short window. So there could be a 10-minute period when a child will go from being aroused to being unconscious. And so when we say sleeping, yes, the child could be asleep, but could then become unconscious or therefore not arousable. So it's hard to really differentiate, are they sleeping versus just not arousable because of underlying pathologic processes.
So because of what is happening when hyperthermia occurs, would it be fair to say that can cause the infant to become unconscious?
That's correct.
But the infant would still be experiencing the organ damage that you have described to this jury.
That's correct.
They would still be experiencing the brain swelling that you described to this jury.
Yes, and it's the brain swelling and lack of alterations in blood flow to the brain that causes that child to become unconscious.
So that would lead to that.
Yes.
Doctor, are you aware of what the normal abilities of a 10-month-old child would be?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that a 10-month-old child would be incapable of unbuckling themselves from a car seat, opening a car door, and leaving this hot environment they are in?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of this witness?
No, sir, I have no questions.
Okay. Can this witness be excused?
Yes.
Very well, doctor, you are excused, and thank you, sir.